So,
Hello guys, it is Monday the 11th of March and it is 10 to 1 because I've been taking my time putting together my teams. I'm going to go through them. I've got some other information for you, but F1 Fantasy is live and I'll have this for you hopefully tonight as soon as I've got it all edited. So let's crack on. First of all, here is my draft fantasy team for round one, the Australian Grand Prix. So I've decided to go big with my constructors. I've got what I'm hoping will be quite a couple of budget builders, and I'm going to be relying on Piastri to score me some points whilst I'm trying to build up my budget. Now, very quickly, just show you, before putting my teams together, I did myself like a little budget breakdown strategy. So how much of my budget did I want to put into each area? So I've decided to go for like 45 million, 45% in an A and B constructor. This has actually cost me more, which I'll explain in a sec. A tier A or B driver at around 25 million, 25% of the budget. And then C tier assets, one being a gamble and the rest for budget building and saving. So 30 million, 30% of the budget. So that's like a draft rough idea. So with that said, the constructors, it's very hard to hit 45 million if you're going for top constructors. So in this instance, I've gone for Ferrari as my main constructor because McLaren, that 30 million is just too expensive if I want to, even the team out. So I'm going to be relying on Ferrari a lot constructor-wise. I've then gone for Mercedes as a B tier constructor because there is talk that Mercedes are going to be pretty quick. Obviously, we know what Russell can do on a good day, and we know Antonelli's fast. It's just whether Antonelli, will keep it on track and he will be as good as everyone is making him out to be. Remember, he's very young. He's only 17 or 18, I believe. So we do have to have a bit of patience with him. But I'm hoping that Mercedes will pull through. And actually, last season, it was McLaren and Ferrari that were the top two constructors for F1 Fantasy. So I've kind of used that philosophy this season by going for Ferrari and Mercedes, i.e. second and third, theoretically, if that makes sense. So like I say, drivers wise, I'm relying on Piastri. He was the highest driver I could afford after I chose all my other assets. So I was going to go for Lewis, but you can see here he's 24.2 million. I do have $1 million in the bank, but I'm still 200,000 short, unfortunately. So yeah, 24.2 million, whereas Piastri 23 million. So I've gone with Piastri on this occasion. I'm going to be relying on him a lot to start the season. He'll be my DRS boost driver. And I'm hoping with that McLaren, he'll be fighting at the front. I've then gone for a bit of a HAAS budget build. Same as like Hulkenberg and Magnussen did last season. So Esteban Ocon came in at 7.3 million, which I think is a good deal. Esteban Ocon, if I remember correctly, finished fourth in the driver value increases, I think. So I'm hoping he'll continue that budget building trajectory only in a HAAS. 7.3 million, I think it was a no-brainer. And I've gone with his teammate Ollie Behrman, who is at 6.7 million. These assets were priced roughly what I thought they would be. So I'm happy about that. Oliver Behrman, we know what he can do. What he did in that Ferrari at Saudi Arabia last year was amazing. Just needs to, if he makes a mistake, just needs to keep his head up and carry on. And I actually like the HAAS lineup, Ocon and Behrman. I think it's going to be a pretty good lineup. And I think they could do well over the season. So that's the plan. That's the hope. Isaac Hadjar. So I've got to admit, I'm not sure about Isaac Hadjar, but at 6.2 million, I think that's cheap, to be honest. And that's why I've gone for him. I was expecting him to be around 7 million because he's in the Racing Bull, but at 6.2 million, I think he's underpriced, and so that's why I've gone with him. Because, you know, even if I lose a little bit of money here, it's not going to be like, say, if I chose Pierre Gasly at 11.8 million. If he doesn't have a good start like last season, I'm going to lose a bit more out, I think. So yeah, 6.2 million. I think he's a cheap choice. He's cheaper than what I was expecting. So that's why I've gone with HAAS, and hopefully, who knows, maybe he'll do like a Colapinto and do well and give us some budget. And then talking of budget, kind of a no-brainer. Cheapest asset is Gabriel Bortoleto, 6 million. That being said, he's highly backed by Fernando Alonso. He's the F2 champion. He was the F3 champion. You know, he's got a lot of potential, and as long as he just keeps it on track, we know the Saubers are going to be at the back. But if he keeps it on track, gains those positions for others, DNFs, etc., you know, it's a couple of points, it's a little bit of budget building, and it saves in the bank. So that is the team I'm going with for Australia. Obviously, long term, we're going to need to get in another top driver asset at some point. So the goal here is to build budget. That's the first stage over the first few rounds, and then see where we are and see if we can make improvements to the team. I did go on F1 Fantasy Tools. Unfortunately, they're still in the process of sorting out the link functionality to link your teams. So I've done it manually, and you can see here's my team at the top, current team, and then we've got the best teams. Now, points wise, I don't have the best team going by F1 Fantasy Tools. The best team is Ferrari, Mercedes, Hamilton, Ocon, Hulkenberg, HAAS, Bortoleto at 177 points. That leaves me a couple of points short. I'm on 174.9. This is obviously in theory. This is obviously like simulated and that. But in terms of expected price change, it's the same, 0.7. And I'm saving $1 million in the bank. So I'm not too fussed about losing out on some points here, because I'm saving $1 million in the bank, and the expected price change is the same, 0.7. And a lot of the teams are less than that in terms of price change. So I'm pretty happy with that. Moving on, I am running 3 teams this year in the global, but obviously my main team is the DelermainSports F1. But as I said before in one of my earlier videos, I'm going to run 3 teams this year for a little bit of extra fun and basically just to experiment. So you can see here in Team 2, which is called number 56, I've actually gone for a build around Hamilton and McLaren. We've got McLaren and Williams as the constructors. I had to do this because obviously McLaren is 30 million, which is a big chunk. It's the most expensive asset, I believe. So I had to go with Williams at 13.1 in order to make this team. That being said, if Sainz and Albon do well, then Williams could increase in value, and then we can make adjustments later in the season, bring in a higher tier constructor. Obviously, Hamilton will be my DRS boost in Team 2. He's at 24.2 million. And then I've gone with an Alpine build. So I've got Gasly and Doohan. Gasly at 11.8 is, I don't know, maybe a 1 or 2 million a bit too high in my opinion, just because he's in an Alpine, and Alpine didn't have a great start to the season last year, but they did have a good end to the season, and that's the thing. So bit hit and miss for me price wise with Pierre, but there's no denying his ability in the car. So that's why I went with him, and I thought I'd take a chance and go with Jack Doohan. I've actually got him as predicted to get the most DNFs this season. I was watching Drive to Survive the other day, and Briatore was saying to him about you know, just keep it on track, don't crash. I control you every millimeter, so you know, no pressure. But I thought I'd take a risk on Jack Doohan, see what he can do. He's at 7.2 million. Again, I've got Ocon, 7.3 million, hoping just to build a bit of budget. And then again, Bortoleto to save on budget, 6 million. And then the final team. Now, originally, this was going to be a team made up of drivers and assets that I wasn't keen on, but it's ended up becoming like a rookie team. So I've called it Rookie of the Year. And in this team, we've got Red Bull and Mercedes. So they're the two cheapest top constructor assets. Red Bull at 25.2 million and Mercedes at 22.7 million. Obviously, with Red Bull, we've got Verstappen, and we know what he's capable of. And if Lawson performs, even better. And I've already mentioned Mercedes before in my first team. This time I've gone with Leclerc, because he was the most expensive driver I could afford once I chose all my other assets. So relying on Leclerc as my DRS boost for this team. He was, I believe, second in value increase last year. So you just never know with Leclerc, and we know what he's capable of in qualifying, so that was a big thing for me. And I'm very torn on who I think is going to outdo who in Ferrari. I don't know. Originally, I was thinking Hamilton. Now I'm kind of swaying towards Leclerc, but now I'm swaying back towards Hamilton. I think it's going to be very even between the two of them, and so I'm very curious to see what Leclerc does this year. I've gone for Hulkenberg just because of money. 6.4, he was cheap. It's the only reason. And like I say, I've ended up with like a trio rookie build. So we've got Behrman again, 6.7, HAAS 6.2, and Bortoleto 6 million. So I'm very curious to see what the rookies do, really. That's why I've kind of gone with that and go from there. Now, I am also playing GridRivals this year. It's my first season playing GridRivals. And I've got two teams. I've got my main team in the GridRivals GPF1 league, which I believe is the main league. It's not fully clear, in my opinion. But I've got a team in that league, and I've got my own league again. Obviously, pins down below if you're playing GridRivals. So on the left, you can see my main team. Point system's a bit different in GridRivals. It's mainly focused around drivers, but bear with me. So for my GridRivals team, I've gone for McLaren as the constructor and Leclerc as my main driver. And then along with them, I've gone with Sainz as my, what we know as turbo driver in F1 Fantasy. I don't know what it's called in GridRivals, but I've gone with Sainz. The reason I've gone with Sainz is because even though he's 14.6 million, which I think is a little high, in GridRivals, you score points by beating your teammate, and I think it's a shoo-in that he's going to beat Albon. And with Sainz, I think he's going to do well, but in terms of fantasy, is it well enough? Because you can qualify, say, 10th, but if you then only finish 9th, it's not a big return points-wise. But I've gone with Sainz. Again, I've gone for the HAASes, Ocon and Behrman, and again, Bortoleto was the cheapest, 3.4 million. So that's my main team. And then in my own league, which is where I'll be experimenting, I've got flipped the switch between driver and constructor. So this time I've got Ferrari and Piastri as my constructor and main driver. And then I've gone with Pierre Gasly. He's 16 million, which I think is too high. But I'm curious to see what he does. And, if he does gain a couple of million, it's a good return. Because then I can go for a cheap asset and hopefully bring in someone else. That's the theory. Again, Sainz as my, quote, turbo driver. Ocon, again, because it was just budget, really. And Bortoleto, again, it was just money saving. With GridRivals, when you choose your assets, you give them contracts. So you don't keep them forever. So I believe I've got everyone at least for 2 races with GridRivals. Anyway, moving on, let's look at the weather for the weekend. Friday is going to be clear, Saturday's cloudy, but Sunday it's going to be raining, which is not the best way we want to start a season, but I hopefully not, but maybe prepare for chaos, especially on turn 1. So, yeah, something to bear in mind when finalising your team is who is good in the wet. So, and who suffers in the wet as well. So that's the weather. It's going to be a wet one by the looks of it. And last season, the top 5 at the Australian Grand Prix was Carlos Sainz, but obviously he was in a Ferrari back then, Charles Leclerc, Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri, and Sergio Perez, who obviously isn't with us anymore, sadly, in terms of Formula 1. God, that sounded morbid. But yeah, so, you know, I'm not expecting Sainz to be in the top 5 now he's in a Williams, but Leclerc, Norris, and Piastri would make sense. So that's the weather. Then I have got my own league this year, the DelermainSports F1 Open. The pin will be in the banner below that's been going throughout the video, and it will be on the channel. Feel free to join. I've done it so you can only pick one team though, so for me it's my main team. Because I didn't know how many people we'd get joining, so I thought we'll just try to make it fair, we'll just have one team. So bear that in mind when you join, if you join. I hope you do, it's just a bit of extra fun. And finally, just 2 updates from yesterday's rules update video. So yesterday I managed to catch some of the rules updates. I think the F1 Fantasy team published by mistake, because after I published the video they took it down. But I've had another look and it's more or less the same, but there is 2 things that I picked up on. So first one is inactive drivers. What happens if one of my drivers isn't racing? If a driver is replaced, injured, or otherwise not participating in qualifying, the sprint or the Grand Prix, they will get penalty points. To avoid penalties, you can use the final fix chip to change your team before each session starts. So if I'll use the example I gave yesterday, if you've got Jack Doohan in, say, the sprint race, but then for whatever reason he can't take part in qualifying, he's going to get penalty points, is my understanding. So you'll actually be given a transfer suggestion, which will be an asset around the same price. But that being said, new for 2025, the game will suggest a transfer of a similar priced driver into your team, like I just said. Choosing to accept the suggestion will be considered part of your transfer allowance. So if you've already maxed out your transfers, you will still receive a 10-point penalty. So if you've made your 2 or 3 transfers, but then you're forced into this another transfer because of injury or sickness or whatever, you will get a 10-point penalty, and the no negative chip will not stop this season. If you play the no negative chip, you'll still get a minus 10-point penalty for any extra transfer. I mentioned in my video yesterday. The other thing I picked up on, this wasn't on the rules yesterday when I did the video, but pit stops. Every team will now get points for pit stops during the Grand Prix, but not sprints. The number of points each team gets will be based on their fastest pit stop during the race. A 5-point bonus will go to the constructor who records the fastest pit stop of the race. Set a new world record and they'll score 15 bonus points. So if your constructor sets a new world record for fastest pit stop, that's 15 points in the bank. So pit stops looks like it's going to be a big part of F1 Fantasy this season, which I think is great. So yeah. So that's it, guys. I hope that all made sense. I've tried to structure it as best as I can. I'll try and keep with this structure moving forward. I usually have a in case you missed it section. In case you missed it, F1 Fantasy is now live, so I'll just say that. But I might add that in the next video. But hopefully short and sweet, made sense. Let me know what teams you're running and what you think of my teams. Just a few days to go. Can't wait. And if you want to check out yesterday's video when I saw the leaked rules, F1 Fantasy rules updates, then click on the card above my head. Or if you want to see my top F1 Fantasy picks for the season that I did a few weeks ago, then again, I'll have another card to the side of the screen. Thank you for watching. Good luck this weekend. Hope you'll join the league. I'll speak to you soon. Goodbye.